What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right. Before I get into this video, I want to give a shout out to Larry for his contribution to the channel. All right. So thank you a lot, Larry, for your contribution to this channel. And I saw your message, and this video is basically inspired by your message. All right. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank everybody that's contributed to this channel over the past year. All right. Whether it's been financially, whether it's been through video ideas, whether it's been through support, whether it's been through whatever. All right, I want to thank everybody that supported the YouTube and the Patreon over the past year, and I also want to apologize for my lack of activity yesterday. I had some business to attend to, but I will be active today and tomorrow. So we'll be cranking them out on the Patreon and YouTube. All right, so let me get into this video. Now, I don't want to keep beating a dead horse. I already know, and you already know, how Isiah Thomas feels towards Michael Jordan. Although Michael claims that he doesn't have the same resentment toward Isiah Thomas as he did 20, 25 years ago, Isiah Thomas certainly does still feel some type of way about Michael Jordan. He's been going around, recently diminishing Michael as a player. I know just the other day he said that Michael was only the fourth best player that he had played against, which is, he's entitled to his opinion, but he's extraordinarily contradictory, because when he was an analyst on NBC 20 years ago, he repeatedly referred to Michael Jordan as the GOAT. And he's referred to Michael Jordan as the GOAT since then on numerous situations. And it's also interesting that he has Larry Bird as the second best player he's ever played against, when back in 1987, he said that if, he agreed with the sentiment that if Larry Bird was a black player, he'd be just any other good player. But now you say he's the second best player you ever played against. And then you also say that Kareem's the best player you played against, which is not an opinion that's far out there, because I think Kareem is the greatest overall basketball player of all time when you look at pro, college, and high school. But it has to be said that by the time Isiah Thomas was playing in the NBA, Kareem was on the downside of his career. He was still a phenomenal center, but you can make a case that Moses Malone was the best center in the NBA in the first half of the 80s, and you can make a case that in the second half of the 80s it was Akeem Olajuwon. So I'm just saying, there's something a little bit funny with this guy, to say the least. But the thing that I think really burns Isiah Thomas's soul is this. Now, we've already touched on the fact that Isiah Thomas is from Chicago, all right? And it hurts him that the city that he's from, he's a villain. He's a pariah in his own hometown. And the guy that he despises or dislikes intensely is an icon from his own hometown. He can't stand this. We've talked about this. But I forgot something. And shout out to the subscriber that brought this up to my attention. I knew it, but I've forgotten about it. Or at least I forgot to mention it. That's not the genesis of Isiah's hatred toward Mike. That just was an extra 10 logs on the fire of hatred. That burning fire furnace of hatred. What started it was the fact that you have to remember, Isiah Thomas played at Indiana. His coach was Bobby Knight. Isiah Thomas was the best player during his tenure with the Indiana Hoosiers. Okay? He was the best player on that team. But by 1984, when Bobby Knight was the head coach of that 84 Olympic team, this is when they still had amateurs. You know, pros couldn't play in 84 or 88. By that time, Bobby Knight was saying that Michael Jordan, who he was coaching, was the best player he had ever seen. Now remember, this is after, if I'm not mistaken, this was around the time and immediately after Jordan had been drafted by the Bulls. So already, he doesn't like this guy because he's going to be playing in Chicago, which is where he's from. And then Bobby Knight, your former coach, says publicly this is the best player he's ever seen. And then, to add insult to more injury, when Michael and his Olympic team, these college players, are playing against the pros in some of these exhibition games, they're beating the shit out of the pros. Michael's killing these guys, including some of those teams that had Isiah Thomas on them. There was some. I did a video about this. They were playing exhibition games against the professionals. Bird might be on the team. Isiah. It might have Tom Chambers and Mark Aguirre or some of these other guys, right? Playing against Michael and the college team, and Mike was killing them. Matter of fact, I think Mike's teams won a majority of those exhibition games. It burned his soul. Plus, Isiah Thomas never got to play on a dream team. Excuse me, Olympic team, not dream team. The 19 Olympics were boycotted by the Carter administration for the Soviet Union and some, I think, human rights violations that they were accused of or something like that. So Isiah Thomas never got the chance to play on an Olympic team. And that's one thing missing off his resume. And Isiah knew that 1992 team would be his last chance. Okay, he knew that his career was dwindling. And, the number one question is, did Michael keep Isiah off that team? My personal feeling is I don't think he was the leading force behind that. I don't think he ever really went and said, I'm not playing on this team if he plays. But sometimes your actions do speak louder than words. And I think that Mike's trepidation was a sign. I think he was the last person picked, besides the two last guys who I think were Leitner and who else? Leitner and somebody else, I don't know. But the main guys, he was the last one picked. So that tells me that Mike had some trepidations. And I think he considered declining at first. You know what I'm saying? Partially because of all of what he had to endure. By that time, you know what I'm saying, the Bulls had won the championship. And they were going to go through the grind of the 91-92 season, all right, which ended up being a harder grind in the playoffs than they thought. And then ultimately, you have to play in the Olympics. So there's a lot of added games. But he did it. But I don't think it was just Mike. I think, if anything, the loudest person that was against it was Magic Johnson. Because we gotta go back to the context. First of all, we gotta go back to let's everybody come. Let's just listen to me here. All of us need to go back to 91, 92. Okay, the Dream Team was selected, I think, 4 or 5 months after the finals in 91. All right? Because it made a big brouhaha about it. We got to go back in our minds to that time period. Okay? Let's all go back. Keep everything into perspective. At that time, the walkout, okay, when Isiah, Bill Laimbeer, and 5 other Pistons chose to walk out with 8 seconds remaining in the game or something, that was fresh in people's minds. That was, no matter how much Isiah Thomas wants to spin it, it was an unsportsmanlike thing to do. When the Bulls was getting their ass kicked by the Pistons, as much as it hurt, they shook their hand. Okay? It was disrespectful, and it was basically saying, we don't respect you guys. All right. Also keep in mind that it was around this time that Magic Johnson had announced that he had the HIV virus. So in many people's minds, many people felt that Magic's situation was terminal. Not immediately, because of how athletic he was and how in shape he was. So many people felt he was going to live like a decade or 15 years, but many people still felt that his situation was terminal. There was a lot of sympathy and empathy toward Magic Johnson at this time. Okay? And at that particular time, it had became very well noted that Isiah Thomas and Magic Johnson's relationship had deteriorated. They were no longer friends. And Magic Johnson put it out there that from what his ear was telling him, what his ear to the street, was that Isiah Thomas was behind the rumors, which was permeating throughout the league, that Magic was gay, that he hung around faggots. Okay, he's the one that put out there that Arsenio Hall, who was a friend of Magic, was gay, which wasn't true. Okay, so these two things, plus the fact that Isiah Thomas was noted throughout the league as being the most hated player in the league, was the presumed architect of the bad boys thuggery, which the league hated. It wasn't just Michael. Okay, all those guys, Barkley, Karl Malone, all these guys hated the bad boys, and they hated Isiah Thomas. They thought he was a dirty fucking player. Now, yeah, don't get me wrong. Karl Malone, John Stockton, a lot of these guys could be dirty players. Okay, but Isiah did shit that could, and Bill Laimbeer too, they did shit that could get you hurt. Like, okay, I'm putting it like this. Karl Malone and Reggie Miller used to do this kick out shit. You know, like they would shoot a 3 or shoot a jumper, and they would kick their foot out to get contact, which annoyed the hell out of the defensive player that was guarding them, right? But Isiah, when he was guarding guys, if you beat him off the dribble, Isiah would intentionally stick his foot out to try to trip you up. Don't you know you could fucking hurt yourself? You could twist your fucking knee, twist and break your ankle doing shit like that. That's the difference. He was doing shit that was extremely dirty. And that's one of the reasons why Karl Malone came down with the elbow of death on Isiah Thomas in that game in 91 that required 40 stitches. And that's why, if you listen to anybody from that time period, if you were outside of Detroit, you cheered because Isiah Thomas was that fucking hated back then. Now, also, it can be stated that by that particular time, Isiah Thomas wasn't the same player that he once was. The last time he had an All-NBA selection was in 1986-87. In fact, the last time he was an MVP candidate, a top 10 MVP candidate, I think was 86-87. After 86-87, Isiah Thomas was no longer even on the balloting when it came to MVP candidates. Now, I guess the same can be said of Larry Bird. Bird, I don't think, was an MVP candidate after 87-88. But Bird is Bird, okay? Speaking of Bird, you know what I'm saying, there was always, I mentioned this earlier in the video, there was always that resentment about what he said toward Bird, okay? Politics definitely played a part in these things. Now, does Isiah Thomas, in my mind, like if you strip away all this other bullshit, did Isiah Thomas deserve to be on that team? Yes. Yes, he did. But do I have a problem with him not being on that team? No. No. Because of the fact that he dug that own grave for himself. With all the things that I mentioned. All right? All the things that I mentioned. All the backstabbing. All of the garbage shit that he did on the court at times and off the court especially. Now, sometimes people will say that LeBron James will do certain teammates dirty, but Isiah was worse. A great example is, I've mentioned it time and time again, is what he did to Adrian Dantley. Adrian Dantley was a great primetime scorer with the Utah Jazz, all right? And Adrian Dantley, sometimes, maybe the offense would get a little stagnant with him having the ball as much. But still, Adrian Dantley helped to push that Detroit Pistons team to a different level. Without Adrian Dantley, the Pistons don't make it to the NBA Finals in 87-88. All right? Isiah Thomas didn't like the fact that Adrian Dantley wouldn't kiss his ass. Okay? Dantley, like I said, was a star in his own right with the Utah Jazz. Won 2 scoring titles, 80-81 season, 83-84 season. 30 points per game both years. So Isiah Thomas went to Jack McCloskey. All right. And pretty much was behind, because he really pushed for this, Aguirre being traded for Adrian Dantley, which pretty much ruined Dantley's career because he got traded to the Dallas Mavericks. At that time, the Dallas Mavericks were a faltering franchise. That was like being traded to Siberia, excuse me. And Dantley was out the league in 2 years. Mark Aguirre was so hurt by that when it comes to talking about Detroit, like when they did the 30 for 30, they had to literally beg him to talk on it because he didn't want to talk about it. It's not the fact he got traded. It's the fact that Isiah Thomas couldn't be real about it. He's so convincing. Isiah Thomas is one of these guys that'll convince you that he's a good guy. He is really convincing at making himself appear to be a good guy. but he's a scumbag. And then I think about it, you know what? When I think about it, Dominique Wilkins was more deserving of being on that dream team than Isiah Thomas at that time. You know what I'm saying? At that time, I wouldn't have a problem with John Stockton being on that team. John Stockton, by that particular time, 92, had probably surpassed Thomas as a player. I'm not saying peak for peak, but by that time, Isiah Thomas's best days were behind him. Okay? Now, I know Larry Bird was a token, pick, but it is what it is. You know what I'm saying? I think personally, the NBA higher-ups did not want any part of Isiah Thomas on that team. I think it had become clear by that time it wasn't just Jordan. It was Pippen. It was Barkley. It was all those guys for the most part. The only one I think may have been like, well, I don't really have a hard time with the guy being on the team. Probably maybe Dave Robinson, but he's corny. You know what I'm saying? He's forgiving and all that shit. The rest of those guys I know. Patrick Ewing, Barkley, Karl Malone, especially, Stockton especially, Drexler's even publicly said something about it a couple years ago. Those guys didn't want Isiah on that team. Okay? And I think that they had Chuck Daly and Jack McCloskey be the leaders of that team to sort of basically cover their ass about, well, look, Chuck Daly's the coach, and if Chuck Daly felt like Isiah's not a part of the team, then how could it be biased? We got the Pistons head coach and the general manager of the Pistons, running this thing. So it's not us. It's not him being blackballed at all. But in reality, he was. Okay? Because I think they said that Chuck Daly had no say in the selection process. But Isiah Thomas brought it on himself. Okay? And I'm not trying to make Jordan out to be this patron saint. Michael Jordan was no saint by any stretch of the imagination. All right? But I do feel like some people who may be supporting Isiah Thomas's situation are LeBron fans who just don't like Jordan, and they're kind of used to defending guys who are used to being accused of doing shenanigans with the front office or with the team, you know what I'm saying? And some people just don't like Jordan, and that's fine, you know what I'm saying, if you don't like Jordan. But I think it's all Isiah, man. I mean, it's on him. I know that it hurts him that he never played on an Olympic team. He wasn't part of the dream team. I know it hurts him. I know it hurts him that he never had that experience. But tell me what you guys think.